obviously makes very compelling points. No one could argue with them. But the mismatch to me when I listen to the discussion is how we make practical change. So from the panel's point of view, what is missing in our collective argument? Because we all come at it for all the same good reasons. We all want to get to the same place, and yet we are failing to persuade local business people who don't want to see bus priority measures, to name but one. We are failing to convince government as much as we could, or, as you mentioned, the local decision makers through the economic partnerships, all these new ways, and local authorities. How do we make this actually make change?
I think this is very much a consumer debate. People will choose the bus if it offers the right choice, or they'll choose the car or the train or whatever. And I think getting, in particular, local authorities and bus companies to work better together through partnerships or bribing them with government money or whatever, that must be the way forward.
Is it a communication problem within the transport sector that perhaps you're not drilling down far enough? People think the buses are good, they feel an affection for them, but it's not quite providing what they want, and this is due to a lack of talking.
There is an element of that. I mean, it's an absolute pertinent question. You know, we're all in agreement to how do you move it forward. I think at local level, I think bus operators need to take some responsibility. I think there is too much at local level where bus operators say, all I do is get the buses out, and as long as I've got the buses out on the road, that's all I have to do. But in actual fact, an enlightened local bus company knows that it has to get on the Chamber of Commerce, it has to speak to the chief executive of the local town, it has to do all of these things as much as, if not more, than getting clean buses out every single morning. And if you do that over a long period of time, such as in Brighton, where we've done it with our local management, Roger French down there, you will get pro-public transport policies come out at the other end of it. But it's a long-term issue, and we need to have some stability with local bus operating groups, and they need to recognise they've got to build up those relationships. And it is about partnerships. And then at national level, we tend to just go to the DFT. Well, the DFT, generally speaking, do get these things, and I'm sure they're very interested in getting the economic report because it's good for them. Well, we mustn't stop there. We actually got to go into BIC, we've got to go into the works and pensions, we've got to influence those people to understand if you're trying to get employment, one of the means of getting people, you know, to employment is to talk about the bus, and that's beyond their normal horizon. And so we've got a policy level at a top level, we've got to get local decision makers influenced. I mean, it's going to the town centre managers. Every single town centre manager I've ever met thinks in terms of the car.
Yes.
First and foremost, they think, how can I make my car parking cheaper? How can I get cars into my shopping centre? And you keep having to explain to them, the buses are bringing more money. What are you going to do about the buses? So many times we want to take the buses out of the town centre. That's not the answer. And we've got to start a lot of policy debates with people all of the time. But it's a tough job.
I wonder whether in that discussion the panel on occasion is not understating the degree to which you are in fact in competition against other transport modes for funds. You're right, it is about the Treasury, of course it's about the Treasury, and under our local government finance regime, all the local money comes from the Treasury. If you want to run rural bus services for good reasons, you can do that if and only if you get money from the Treasury. So I wonder whether the difficulty is the unwillingness of government to say what its objectives actually are. What is it trying to achieve with all this money? The amount of money going to railways is unthinkable relative to the amount of money that might go into buses. Then you've got propositions for high-speed rail. Astronomical amounts of money relative to what you think you could do good things with. So I would go back to the point that was made earlier on. The real failure is the unwillingness of government to write down a national policy statement for roads and railways. What is it they want to achieve? What's the problem they're trying to solve? And from that, with the benefit of your analysis, you can fight better for funds to achieve those objectives. At the moment, they're just making it up as they go along.
David.
Well, it's difficult to disagree with that, but I think in the end all governments become pragmatic somewhere along the line. All governments have to respond to circumstances, and this is part of that generating growth agenda, and it has its own benefits in itself. But it's easy to sell. £9 billion. It's infrastructure. It's British. It's UK based. You can see that's a good selling point.
So few people in London.
Yeah. Well, London's got huge population growth. But the problem with the buses, again, is that cause and effect. You can't, all that spend on buses would do phenomenal things, but it's just very difficult to quantify, I think. I think that's one of the problems. Yes, there should be a joined up thinking.
You can wait a long time for a vision, and I want to catch a bus now. I'm really tactical about these things. Let's just go with the flow. If the government wants to spend money on bits of concrete, let's have some more bus rapid transit schemes tomorrow. Let's just do it. Get digging.
Well, I mean, I think I would go back to your point around needing a statement, and I would go a little bit higher. I agree with your point, we just need to get on buses today. On the other hand, I think it's also quite useful to understand how government sees this all coming together. And my sense of working with DfT is that typically they've sort of worked a little bit like that, and I think it's about time they started to work a bit more horizontally. And if we could understand how all this slotted together in an integrated way, how you get off a bus and go onto an international rail route, or you get off a bus and go on to fly and do business in other markets, and I think that would be quite helpful.
Claire?
Yeah, I mean, no, Stephen, I mean, it's a very valid point that you're making. It's a very important point. I mean, I guess what I would want to add, really, I think it's certainly a false choice, though, to be pitting bus against rail, for example. I mean, I know, I take your point that there's a limited pot, and actually we do need a road strategy. You know, I take your point on those. But I think, you know, the fact that, to pick up on Rianne's point, it's actually just more joined up thinking, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot, the integration between the modes, and the fact that a very high proportion, I mean, something like 12% or whatever of rail journeys are facilitated by a journey from the state to the station by the bus. You know, it's actually working together. So I think it's looking at it as an integrated whole, but really the key thing, what we're really competing with, to be blunt, is the car. Now, not to say that we don't, car use is important, and there are some journeys that will always want to be made by car, but ultimately a more intelligent car use, a better use of our roads in that sense, I think is probably where we would want to focus.
There are policy decisions that can be made. I mean, going back to your point, just thinking about it a bit more, where, I don't agree about it tactical, but if you took London, you'd say another 1 million people are coming into London. And are we really going to build more motorways into London? No. Are we going to have an inner London ring road? No. Because it's just be too difficult to do. So what are we going to do in terms of catering for another 1 million people in getting around London? And one of the easiest ways of doing it is to invest in the bus network in London, because that's the way to carry on making London function.
But it can be done elsewhere, can't it? I think in Sheffield they've just signed a large PFI to improve the road network around Sheffield. At the same time, there's going to be a partnership between the local authority and the bus providers. Everyone wins. It's great.